And we knew that was going to happen. If the Taliban's in charge, we know that women aren't going to be able to do all of the things that just make up basic human dignity. And I know that the United States government wants Bagram back. President Trump has talked about that. We cut off all the aid, which is an insane behavior. What you may hear from many diplomats is like, well, they're never going to do that. Like, we're not even going to try. We're just going to abandon these women and girls and children. And we keep hearing these murmurs of, like, also I want to address, there are no refugees coming to the United States, right? So at least there's a door for Afghan women in Europe. And we've got, Afghan evac right now. For anybody listening, if you're an organization that works to help wartime allies and locally employed staff, we are working on working with a few other organizations around a global framework for how do we take care of these folks. Would love to engage. Reach out to us at contact@afghanevac.org. If we're talking about, if governments are considering recognizing the Taliban or trying to make deals with the Taliban, like Russia has already, we hope that across the alliance, across the Europeans and the U.S., folks will take seriously this gender apartheid that's occurring. Right? And we knew that was going to happen. If the Taliban's in charge, we know that women aren't going to be able to do all of the things that just make up basic human dignity and should be baseline human rights. I don't think that recognition should occur without significant progress on women and girls, without significant safety for our wartime allies, and without the Taliban releasing every single hostage they have from across the various countries. I think, I know that the United States government wants Bagram back. President Trump has talked about that. I'm sure that a lot of countries are looking at mineral rights in Afghanistan. I'm sure that there are other, Afghanistan would like aid. We cut off all the aid, which is an insane behavior. And I think that, Afghan women and girls deserve to be able to go to school past 6th grade. So any conversation that's happening about normalization of relations has got to have those prerequisites. And look, what you may hear from many diplomats is like, well, they're never going to do that. Well, okay, fuck them then. They don't get to have normalization. They don't get trade. They don't get this. They don't get that. Like, we're not even going to try. We're just going to abandon these women and girls and children. Fully half of the population at that camp in Doha that I was talking about, Camp Asaliya, are women and girls, women and children. Half. And the United States is considering just sending them back. They want to just send them back. In fact, they've tried several times to just send them back.
This is the insane shit for me. Like, we're talking about the reason why European governments like Germany are toying with the idea or already doing some sense of normalization is to get assistance on the ability to deport people, to send people back to this shit. And they're doing that so that they can score more points locally, domestically in their political cycles because they're afraid of the AfD. And so they're which is just like for anyone who's not paying attention to the German politics, it's just like, a far right, aggressive, angry fringe of a political, spectrum that is now becoming the mainstream. And they're terrified of that. So even the centrist and even left-leaning parties are talking about deportations. And we're talking about deportations back to Afghanistan. It's crazy.
What's happening in labor in the UK, what's happening in Germany, what's happening elsewhere. The people want you to sack up. The people want you to have the courage to fight for these folks. Being weak-kneed babies is not going to work for anybody. Don't let them, like what we're seeing here in America, I was just in the UK, and what we heard a lot of was like people are afraid that they're just a few years behind us. What we just learned on Tuesday with the big election here in the United States is that the people want you to fight. People want you to stand up to these bullies. We fought a world war about this and we kicked the fascists' asses. We don't need to go back and do that again. We already won that war. We need to come with the swagger and come with the courage to say, sit the fuck down, man, and to take government action to make sure that they sit down. We cannot shy away from our responsibility to vulnerable people around the globe.
So what is the response that you're hearing from the inside of these relationships that you formed in this coalition, as well as the you have the ear of a lot of people in government, and hopefully they will react to the push for what you're really pushing for. But what is their reaction with regard to Pakistan sending millions of people back, Iran sending millions of people back? This is just crazy that they're within days of the 12-day war with Israel and in Iran. You've had millions of Afghans who've just been like 50,000 a day, just chucked right back into Afghanistan into this.
Okay.
And what's the
It's insane.
response?
Well, the response is, oh, this is very hard. And like, if you're afraid to do hard things in politics, get the fuck out. Like, the whole point of going into politics is to do hard things and make the world a better place. At least that's why I got involved in politics after I got out of the Navy. Like, I don't understand why anybody would go in wanting an easy day. Like, those jobs are supposed to be hard because the consequences are lifelong and life and death. So we're hearing, like, within the Trump administration, a couple of things, right? The State Department willy-nilly designated Islamabad as the post that all Afghans have to process at for any visas because there's no consular services in Afghanistan. They didn't bother talking to Pakistan. They didn't make a deal. I've talked to the Pakistani ambassador to the U.S. several times, and he's just like, what do you want us to do? The government won't work with us. They'd be willing to help our people. They've committed to me multiple times. They'd be willing to help our people, but the Trump administration isn't even interested. The lady that they had running Afghanistan and Pakistan for the State Department was an Afghan American woman who was trying to repatriate people, and she ran away because we had the audacity of saying, hey, Mary, what are you doing? And I guess she was like worried. And I was like, well, if you're worried, why are you doing these heinous things? Just don't do the heinous things. And what we hear from across the Trump administration is that people want to do the right thing, but nobody wants to take on Stephen Miller. And like, that guy is a weenie who deserves to be stuffed in a locker. I don't know why Seb Gorka is afraid to engage Stephen Miller. We know he cares about this. We know Mike Waltz cares about this. And like a ton of other people, right? MAGA people care about Afghans. Like, they're popular across 90% of the public. And I don't understand why all these tough guys let Stephen Miller bully them.
Yeah, I mean, in 21, we were in Berlin at a film festival with some of our Afghan filmmakers, and then it was at the time when all of these airlifts and all of these people were getting in, and all these special evacuations were taking place. We were getting a lot of the same calls that you were receiving. And please, here's my credentials as a journalist. I work for this, I work for this television state media. I'm in danger. My family needs to get out. What can you do to help us? And we were really, like paralyzed by the reality of what does it look like to get people out. But at that time, everyone was tripping over themselves to help Afghans. And here we are now turning a blind eye to millions of them being deported back through like just blatant ignorance of international law. It's almost as if like when the international law and the covenants are ignored on one side, everyone else is like, oh, well, then we can do that too. So what's the difference? So, we had a lot of members of our community who are Afghan, but they were born in Iran because their parents had fled the Taliban before. And then during that time period, they've never known Afghanistan. And now they're seeking asylum or getting asylum here in Europe. And they're potentially in danger of being deported back because their asylum either hasn't been renewed yet or hasn't been renewed or hasn't been approved in the first place, even though they arrived in 2021. And so you have these European governments who are like presenting one story to the press and then another story to the potential voters who they're worried about losing, that, like they were never going to get those voters in the first place. So I don't know why they're modifying their policies to try to they're not pulling anybody back into their tent. Those people were trying to burn down their tent. So I don't understand why they keep burning it down themselves. It's really kind of insane. You see this happening across the whole globe, and that I don't know. Like I mean, you were saying some things before, and it looked like you were like a hip hop MC because everyone behind the cameras over here was just nodding along with you in unison as you were dropping this knowledge, and it's really insane that we're in this place just a couple of years removed from the position we were in to help people. I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think will actually change this? What are the pathways for us to get back to our morals and to honor the the norms of the game?
Sure. Well, Congress needs to pass some legislation here. We need to see national and international governing bodies passing legislation taking care of refugees. And look, I think people need to recognize that the United States is not going to lead on. I think the Afghans will likely be okay. I think I hope that we'll get to a good place for them. But I think other populations are going to need to find somewhere else to go, at least for the next 3 years. And I don't think that's the right answer. I think we need to be leading on this. Ronald Reagan said in his final speech that he talked about his vision for a shining city on a hill, and he explained it. It was like a city teeming with commerce and bustling with people. And if the city had to have walls, that the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anybody with the strength and the courage and the temerity to get there, and the heart, right? And so, like, Ronald Reagan would roll over in his grave if he knew what Donald Trump was doing to his vision of a shining city on a hill. And I disagree with Ronald Reagan on everything, right? Except for that. And we have to have a serious conversation about this and not accept Stephen Miller's vision for a darker tomorrow. We have to make sure that people are being held accountable. A lot of it is donors, right? Big companies coming in and paying this guy off. That's crazy. Every one of those big companies has refugees and asylees that work for them. Every single one of those companies makes money off of telling heartbreaking stories, if they're a media company, of heartbreaking stories of these folks. And then they pick up their cameras and they leave, right? And so the world has a global obligation to vulnerable people, especially as we're going to start seeing climate refugees, and it's not going to get better. So we need to solve this big vexing problem, just like we need to solve for healthcare, and just like we need to solve for affordability and housing and all of these other things. And they're all interrelated, right? So I don't have a lot of hope that things are going to change before the midterms next year in the United States, but everybody around the globe can be working together to figure out what right looks like and what right looks like in their country, and sort of how we can have a through line globally to get it right. I mean, like, right now, a lot of what Afghan EVAC is doing is we launched this program called Battle Buddies with Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America to stand with refugees and asylees, not refugees, to stand with asylees or hopeful asylees in immigration court as Donald Trump tries to throw them out. We're trying to stop the bleeding right now, and then we can rebuild, right? And we can't keep doing this pendulum, right? We're never going to get anywhere if every time especially if people on the left rebuild very slowly, too slowly, and then people on the right come through and just slap everything down and crush it all and take us further back, which is exactly what we've seen over the past 10 years.
And I think, something that maybe not everybody pays attention to, because you could hear the whole refugee thing has kind of become a dirty word. You don't even use that word in the media anymore. It's migrant, it's illegal alien. We're back to like the shit I used to hear when I was a teenager.